Alright guys, welcome back to Michael Mortal, and welcome to a fresh new guide video for Elden Ring. Today, we're going to be learning how to craft fire grease, drawstring fire grease, and fireproof dried liver. Where do we find these recipes? What do these items do? Where do we find the materials we need? All that and more will be covered in this video. So let's get started. First off, make sure you have purchased the crafting kit from the merchant in the Church of Ella. Cookbooks are pointless without them. The cookbook we need for these recipes is the Armorer's Cookbook 1. In order to find it, you're going to want to head to the Aegeo Lake north side of Grace. It lies just down the road from the Gatefront Grace to the southeast past the camp of Godric Knights. Head on horseback to the northeast from the Grace, jumping over the rocks in the way. You will reach a camp full of Kaidan mercenaries. You can rush in and murder them all, or you can do what I did. Approach the camp from the right, avoiding detection. Jump off of Torrent a few feet out and crouch. Creep up the rubble that leads over the spike barriers and into the camp. The cookbook should be on a body to the right, next to a bunch of pots. Once you have acquired the cookbook, you're going to want to port out of there quickly before... Oh shit! Anyway, now that we have the cookbook, what does it allow us to make? If we check the details, they tell us that we now have the ability to craft fire grease, drawstring fire grease, and fireproof dried liver. Fire grease is a consumable that allows us to grant buffable weapons fire damage for a time. From the testing I've done, it seems to add 85 fire damage to any weapon it is applied to for about 60 seconds. Drawstring fire grease is a version that is applied more quickly and adds more damage, but it lasts quite a bit less time. For my estimations, it adds 110 fire damage instead of 85, but it also only lasts about 10 seconds. Finally, the fireproof dried liver is also a consumable. This item, upon use, improves the player's fire damage prevention. It doesn't add to your base stat, instead opting to increase your percentage of reduction directly. This buff lasts for approximately 2 minutes, and it gave me about 10% added reduction in my limited tests. So, now that we know what we can make, and what those items do, it's time to figure out what materials we need to make them, and where we can go to get those materials. Let's start with the fire grease. If we go into our crafting menu and mosey on over to fire grease, we will see that this recipe calls for 1 root resin and 1 smoldering butterflies per craft. Root resin is quite easily found in most forested areas around the lands between. Pretty much anywhere that trees can be found. However, my go-to early game farm for this item lies near the War Master's shack in northwest Limgrave. From the Castlefront Grace, head northwest through the gate and up the road, avoiding the giant and the archers that are trying to murder you. Eventually, you will reach a different shack by the name of Stormveil Shack. Light the Grace and head east down the main road. You can't miss it. Now, I should probably mention, there is a merchant in the shack that sells Ashes of War. However, if you rest at the Grace at night, the bell-bearing hunter will be there instead of him. This is a very tough early-game boss, and I recommend building a fair amount before facing him. So, as to avoid this unpleasant scenario, rest at the Grace immediately after arriving, and pass time until early morning. This way we will have plenty of time to farm as much as we need going forward. There are 3 root resin deposits around some trees directly from the west side of the shack. Each one can drop up to 3, so you should have what you need in no time. Now, to the smoldering butterflies. These are a bit harder to find than root resin. Typically, they are found next to campfires, bonfires, smoldering ruins, and the like. The earliest one I have found within 10 feet of a site of grace is located in Liurnia of the Lakes. It is the Liurnia Lake Shore Grace. There is a merchant right near the grace with a campfire that spawns these butterflies. Now, normally you'd have to go beat Margit, the Fell Omen, get through the entirety of Stormveil Castle, and beat Godric the Grafted in order to even get to Liurnia. However, there is in fact a side path around the castle through the cliffs. Starting from the Stormhill Shack Grace, head north following the road. When the road curves left, press onward through the brush ahead instead. Following the path to a giant bridge, the way forward is seemingly blocked. However, there is some rubble connecting the ruined bridge to the mountainside. Taking care not to fall, use Torrent to traverse the gap. Then take a right into a hidden alcove that leads along the cliffside. Run past the wolves and eventually you will make it to the first Liurnia Grace. Keep following the road, running straight through the soldiers' blockade, and you will reach the Liurnia Lake Shore Grace. You can get up to 3 butterflies per rest from the nearby merchant's campfire. If you prefer getting multiple butterflies in a harder run, or are using a later game build, the Castle Morn Lift Grace is another option. If you can avoid or kill all the enemies in the courtyard just after the lift, it contains 7 or 8 butterfly spawns, with each being able to drop up to 1 to 3 butterflies. So, if you need a bunch right now, or if the difficulty is trivial for your build, That would be my other suggestion. So, that's everything we need for the first recipe. Now, we can make fire grease whenever we need it. The drawstring fire grease is largely the same, as we can see from our crafting menu. The only difference is that this version requires string. String is pretty much only found from demi-humans in most cases. They have a lot of drops, so getting what you need out of them can be annoying. As quick a farm as possible, with as many of them as possible, is the way to go. If you've seen my last guide on how to raise item discovery using the pickled silver fowlfoot, which, if you haven't, then, how could you? Go follow this link and get learnt now. Anyway, if you saw my last guide, you will easily be able to improve the payouts on this farm using the boost from the silver fowl feet. You will also definitely have unlocked the Fort Height site of Grace, from which this farm is going to start. Head northwest up the road nearby the Grace, and you'll be ambushed by many demi-humans. Murder them all and take what is rightfully yours. This should easily net you the string you need, especially if you are using the Fowlfoot buff. Just keep in mind, you will have to run back to the Grace so as not to waste the item, because fast traveling causes the passage of time. So unless you want to make enough silver fowl feet to consume one per run, I suggest rushing back to the Grace with Torrent. I believe the returns to still be worth it. Finally, the Fireproof dried liver. If we go into our crafting menu, we will see that this recipe requires roa beast liver, and smoldering butterflies. As I covered in my last video, a great roa farm lies in the first step Grace area. We've also already covered the butterflies, so all that's left is the beast liver. This item only drops from herbivorous beasts, so goats, rams, rabbits, stuff like that. A great farm that I have found early on is at the Church of Dragon Communion. This Grace is accessible from the coastal cave, as I also covered in the last video. There are 5 goats and 3 rabbits directly down the slope from the Grace. I prefer to use a bow to hunt wildlife because melee on horseback can get tedious depending on your weapon. Also, these guys will definitely drop enough tiny bones to make more bow and arrows than you will use hunting them. Just make sure that you grab the Nomadic Warriors Cookbook 1 from the merchant at the Church of Ella so you can craft them. I will be covering this in more detail in a later video. This farm can also be buffed by the silver pickled fowlfoot, as the Grace is right nearby and they are technically enemies that you are murdering. And there we have it. Everything you need to know about how to craft the fire grease, drawstring fire grease, and fireproof dried liver in Elden Ring. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Please remember to like the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to see more Elden Ring guides and other awesome content. Also, please leave me any suggestions or comments down below. Is there anything you'd like to see me cover specifically? Did I miss something important? Any tips or tricks to share with the community? It's all welcome here. Until we meet again, bye.